The world is always ending. As we lose our sense of purpose, as we lose belief in the systems and the ideologies which give life purpose, it begins to, in a way, fade away. And as we inject new meaning, as we invent new purposes, then life begins to crop up again. The world, in a way, is reimagined, is restarted. There is at present something of a meaning crisis, and the reason, perhaps, that many political ideologies which exist, liberal or conservative, seem to be in such a fervor today to really make their point, make their mark in the world, is because they are essentially compensating for the basic fact that their ideologies do not construct the whole of the world. They do not encompass everything that we need to know and understand. The more desperate that a person is to get you to believe something, the weaker their ideological structures are. And the reality is we do not have a fully systemic, holistic structure of beliefs. And the fact that so many people are insistent that their type of belief is correct, that they cling to it as a part of their identity, this actually tells you that they have very little going for their actual identity. They have very little going for a reality-based system of meaning. If their systems of belief were to vanish overnight, no one would really care. We would all move on. Everything would be fine, and the world would continue to function as it was and will be. I, for one, do not worry about the meaning crisis. I am perfectly content to let every sense of meaning, every ideology which has been instilled in me, let die and move on from that. It doesn't bother me. The meaning crisis is not even really a crisis of meaning. It's a crisis of our own inability to face the simplicity of what we are, what human nature is, what existence presents to us. And I don't think I need to worry about that. Because, well, I haven't attached myself to any of these things. I haven't attached myself to the same kind of worries, the same kind of superstitions and other silly things that most people seem to simply depend on. My understanding of it is that these structures of belief are in fact the very things that have been causing human strife and human suffering for an immeasurable amount of time. And so when someone tells me that there is a crisis of meaning, I say, no, there's not. This is actually exactly what you need. This is exactly what's necessary for anything to actually positive to transpire, for any greater development to occur. I don't believe that nihilism is the actual problem of the human condition right now. I think that nihilism is actually more like the solution. I think that the problem has been that for such a long time humanity has believed in things which didn't serve it and just created warfare, created division, and we have fed these things our belief, these philosophies, because they could serve as distractions or they could serve as systems of control. And our job now, discarding these, moving on from them, the ones that do not serve us at least, will be having to face reality as it is and making the most of that, which sounds like a very simple thing, yes, but the truth is it's actually tremendously difficult to just make things work properly and not think about all these problems that you can conceive of for yourself that are mostly fictions. I've talked many times about ideological possession, and my basic prescription to these people is something along the lines of meditation. Realize that the things that you think are so important, your obsessions, fixations, are not all that. That you can really move on from these things and you can still be a whole person. You can still experience all the things you want to experience in life, and they're mostly holding you back. This may not seem like too much of a hot take, but there's really nothing wrong with just admitting that you don't know everything, that you are living an imperfect life, and things you believe now may eventually, as years go by, start to fade away. That's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with just being okay with yourself in an imperfect way. And in a way, we're always trying to create this sense of perfection. We're always trying to develop our ideas, hone our world outlook in such a way so that everything makes sense, everything is perfectly aligned, and anyone who disagrees with us is just wrong. And this creates a kind of creates a factionalization. I feel like in a way it's not even natural for ideologies to compete against each other. I think what's more natural is let the ideologies develop their own kinds of societies, and if people like that, they can stay in it. If they don't, they can leave. The people who develop the best ideologies will be self-evident. And I mean, what better way is there to test your ideology than that? Why argue about it when you can show rather than tell? So it just kind of feels to me like humanity is yet to really prove that we can have productive conversations with each other. So maybe this meaning crisis, maybe it has more to do with the basic fact that the disagreements we have at the collective level are colliding to the point where we're realizing they don't amount to anything. If they don't amount to anything, we can't create anything. And the longer that goes on, the longer we realize that we're kind of not doing anything. We're kind of just letting things fester in a way. I mean, I guess that has a negative connotation. I'm not even trying to paint this as a negative thing, really. There's just something about the ego that does not want to let up. It wants to insist against everything, against everyone, that it is correct in every way. And stopping that seems to take nothing less than a force of God. I remember it used to be thought of as kind of a big deal that the algorithms on social media were posting more frequently links to articles that would incite some kind of anger in people, rage baiting, and yeah, that used to be a big deal, but it seems like it's been integrated. It's almost like our psyches really were begging for that. We got what we wanted, and so now what? So now it's like the insularity, is that even a word? Of everything has piled up so much that people only want to associate with their own groups. They only want to associate with people who agree with them. This almost seems paradoxical. Like, you would think if we like things that make us angry, wouldn't we want to associate with people who make us angry? Kind of an absurd proposition, I guess. There's a quote from a song I think people should consider, and that is, "What if all my enemies were dead?" And this is not a violent supposition. It's like, can you imagine what it would be like if, instead of fixating on oppositional mindsets, on argumentativeness, what if you were just tasked with creating what you thought was correct? What if you didn't have to worry about all those things? So the solution to the meaning crisis needs to be something like, how do we apply creativity to the way in which we are developing our opinions and structures and outlooks and so on? I don't think what we need to fix any of the problems in the world is, another person who knows how to argue very well, another person who knows how to disambiguate things and tell the other person they're wrong because X and Y and Z. Not that that doesn't serve an importance, it's just, that's not everything. Like, there's more to it than that. There's more to all of this than that. What I'm basically trying to say is, I don't believe in politics in this sense that we have currently contrived. What I believe in is people who build, create things, people who want to experience things, people who are really connected with what they actually want outside of our super ego rationalization of everything. So I think the more layers of abstraction you create between your authentic self and the self that you have contrived out of whatever ideology, whatever beliefs you have, the more difficulty you will have with the meaning crisis, because it's going to seem increasingly absurd, because you're going to keep on trying to hold on to everything you believe, and it's just not going to work. Even the belief itself is a kind of clinging, and the reality is your belief does not represent anything in reality. So as long as you can't take that belief and turn it into something more valuable, as long as you are using that belief as a kind of crutch, something to potentially hurt other people with because you disagree with them, you will have to realize eventually that the task this belief has set you on is impossible to fulfill. And realizing that is kind of like the first step in a 1,000-mile journey or whatever. It's you start with that realization, and then from there you can actually start to be constructive. Because when you let go of the belief, or at least let go of the perception of the importance of the belief, then you can actually start to engage with reality. So in a way, kind of like the end boss of the internet is getting over the internet and realizing that if we don't actually constructively work together to do things, then none of this really matters. And I don't mean like, championing some political cause, getting signatures for a petition. All those things are fake. No one really believes in those things. And I don't trust anyone who, seriously engages with that kind of activism. I find it highly untrustworthy. So I know I said nihilism before, but in a way, the answer to the meaning crisis is just kind of realizing how stupid a lot of this is. We will be a lot happier as a people if we can move on from placing the entire weight of our identity on our belief systems. And even more so, I don't feel like it's even natural or necessary for everyone to feel like they should be responsible for understanding every problem in the world. We would probably be a lot more successful as a society if we were focusing more on building high trust connections in reality, instead of trying to have this chaos where everyone's standing as some ideological figurehead for what they think is going to work. And probably the most ironic thing is that once you get closer to what I'm describing, it actually becomes more apparent what the actual answers are to a lot of problems, because it's just like you're dealing with the problem, figure out the most effective answer in that moment with that problem. I start thinking sometimes, how hard would it realistically be to solve all these problems if it weren't for all the infighting between different groups? Realistically, if you just took any position and ran with it and started actually doing things productive, how long would it take just from a random assortment of beliefs to actually really do positive things in the world? All this, by the way, is coming from someone who thinks they basically do have all the answers. So if I can say this, then I think that it's a somewhat tenable conclusion. I think that we would be much more effective in simply moving on to a certain degree. So in conclusion, just there should be less focus on what we're trying to create in the end. There should be more focus on what the process is, what that's going to look like, and what kind of people is it going to take to actually make things like that happen. Put less personal responsibility on people for what they believe, and more responsibility on them for what they seem to be creating or leading us to.
I never really understood that guy.